Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. I got a lot packed into today's report, including a new long-range update through winter, and also a preliminary look at spring of next year and even summer of next year based upon some information. So let's dig into this. I want to see where we've been, though, so far in the month of November. So I got two maps here. One on the left shows you the precipitation ranks for each climate district for the 1st of November through the 20th, and on the right I have the same thing but for temperatures. Now, if we take a look here, a couple of important things to point out. From the southwest into the hard red winter wheat belt, this has been an area that's continued to struggle with drought. The rain shadow effect has been quite strong. Systems have rolled through and eject pretty far to the north. That means it's difficult to get that moisture to come all the way back into the hard red winter wheat belt. We also have some dry conditions in the eastern corn belt that have extended down into Alabama. And then when you look at North Carolina, from east to west, it gets wetter. Okay, so we've had some trouble with getting moisture far enough to the east coast here, despite what Hurricane Nicole did much earlier in the month. Now, the temperature side of this map is interesting to look at because we've clearly seen some very cold air that set up shop here over the Pacific Northwest get let out across the country over the last 7 or 8 days. But just to show you how cold it has been in the Northwest, everywhere that you see the number 130 here, that's a new all-time record cold first 3 weeks of November. So it's been brutally cold there. Now this old temperature pattern has flipped, and it's going to continue to do that throughout this week. But there's a lot of moderation coming as we finish the month of November and get into December with the temperature pattern across the country. And before we talk about that, though, I got to show you this. Now, this animation, there's a dot, a blue one, for every time we got close to a record low, tied a record low, or even set a new one. And as we get in here toward the 18th, look at these cold air that made it all the way to the Gulf Coast, all the way to the East Coast. Here it is on the 20th. Now getting this morning on the 21st, several places here tying or setting some new record low temperatures. And that's been because this large ridge that set up over Alaska, with this kind of reflection of that ridge setting up over Scandinavia, just sent all the cold air just kind of out, and it's come all the way over to the East Coast, and it's sitting here right now. Now, over the last 7 days, you can really see that our temperatures, especially in the midsection of the country, have been up to 15 to 20 degrees on average colder than normal. But the question is, how long does this last? Because that ridge that's set up over Alaska, it's out, it's gone. So we need to talk about that, what that means in the longer term. We also need to discuss our precipitation. Because over the last 7 days, other than that front that kind of swept through here, we've been relatively dry. But the good news is if you take Nicole's precipitation, if you take what's been given to us by this front, our current drought picture started to improve. Now here's the latest drought monitor for the United States. We still have about 81% of the land area in some form of drought. It's really anchored in the plains, hitting the hard red winter wheat belt quite hard. Of course, we have the drier section right in through here, and then in the west, still, even though there's been decent snowpack already building up in the Sierra Nevada, it'll take a long time for that to really improve the drought situation in the west. But what I'm going to show you is the change map. So if we just take a look here in the last week, we had a 1-class improvement in the drought monitor, again, thanks to that front and Nicole. So overall, the amount of drought in the country is beginning to shrink. Now I'm going to kind of make a statement here about where I expect this map to be by the end of winter. And I think we're going to see a reduction in total drought area from where it is now at about 81%, likely down there to about 60%. I think that's where we're going to be. We needed to see where that moisture is going to be coming in and where we expect the drought to linger. So I'm going to talk about all of that at the end of this video. Now, just to show you how rough things have been, though, take a look at, the hard red winter wheat belt in Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, and South Dakota. So this is an area that has continued to struggle with getting good moisture. While blizzards have hit north of there, we just haven't been able to return the moisture to this area. Now, what we see over here in the Carolinas is this kind of just abnormally dry. We're in that 60 to 80% range. A couple of pockets down there near half of normal rainfall for the last month. We're going to see some improvement with one system that's coming late this week. I got to show you what that system's going to do because I think it's going to help this whole region in the eastern corn belt to the southeast, and then later on for us in the Carolinas. So get an idea on this next system. This is the probability through the next 10 days of getting at least an inch of rainfall. So you can see that our probabilities throughout North Carolina are sitting in that 60 to 80% range. And I'll show you the system that's going to come through to help deliver this. What's important to note here is that much of the central United States has a very low probability of picking up precipitation, and that extends into the Canadian prairie. And why I'm stressing this is because we've been watching the Mississippi River levels right down here from Cairo south, almost down to Vicksburg. And I focused a lot on Memphis. Right now, the river is about 4 feet below low stage, but without good moisture continuing to return to the tributaries like the Arkansas, the Missouri, even the Illinois or the Wisconsin River, this is just not going to help fill the river back up quickly. So I want to keep you aware of the troubles we're still having here. But we do have a system we got to watch, and I want to show you where it's coming from. So this is our height pattern today. Troughs are in blue, ridges are in red. Now what I'm watching on Tuesday into Wednesday is this guy right here. Okay. Now what's setting this up is we've taken cold air all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And when you do that, you end up getting a lot of cold air sitting on top of very warm water. And that sets up something that we call a baroclinic zone. It's where your pressure contours are crisscrossing your temperature contours, and there's moisture from the Gulf. So what's happening is the setup is taking place here. The kicker is right there. I just drew an arrow through it. It's actually pointing right here. And this shortwave trough is going to dive down through Wyoming on Wednesday. And then it's going to kick pretty far to the south into Oklahoma and Kansas and even touching Texas by Thursday midday. And it's going to start to dig deeper over Arkansas and then eject into the Ohio River Valley. And as it does so, you know how this works. That trough sweeps through us, really lifting the air late this week, and it's going to deliver a pretty big shot at rainfall. Now after it goes through, we're going to take a look at how the rest of the pattern evolves going into the very end of the month. But it's highly amplified with a deep trough in the west and a big ridge over the east. So that's going to really change our temperature pattern as well. So I want you to see this late week system. So here's the European model today. Currently, it is outperforming the GFS by about 9%. So we're going to stick just with one model today. As we play through, not a whole lot going on Tuesday, Wednesday, and even up to Thursday morning on Thanksgiving. We will see temperatures moderating throughout the week, but they're going to drop off at the end of the week as this system right here starts to take shape. Now, it's just beginning to form midday on Thanksgiving over the lower Mississippi River Valley, but the latest model runs begin to curl it up into a deeper low centered right here, kind of over the confluence of the Ohio and the Mississippi. And out ahead of it, it's going to draw on a deep reservoir of moisture coming off the Atlantic and coming out of the Gulf. So already by Friday morning, we're seeing precipitation moving from west to east across North Carolina. Now later in the day, the European model really enhances lift between these two arrows with a very strong upper level front getting punched through by what we call a dry slot on the backside, meeting the warm conveyor belt on this side and wrapping itself around the low. And as a result of that pattern, we're really able to get strong vertical motion here and a lot of precipitation. Could we see some storms out of this? That is possible. All right, but this is Friday midday working into Friday evening, and at that point we get the dry slot working its way in, and that system curls onto the north. Now what I'll be watching for afterward, this will be on Saturday, will be some snow piling up in the Appalachian Mountains. And that system moves on out and high pressure comes in behind it next week. So that's the mainstay of our precipitation through at least the next 7 to 10 days. So let's kind of come in here to the high-res Euro and get an idea on total precip amounts. Now we're already through Tuesday into Wednesday. Here we are Thursday. There's Thursday evening through Thursday evening. It'll be into Friday morning that the rain starts to come through. And what you notice here, if I just show you what Friday's going to look like, there it is. That's quite a bit of precip. If we get the total number out here, there's a lot across the state. They're going to be getting between 1 and up to 3 inches of total accumulated precipitation. So there's some very wet weather coming in at the end of this week based upon the current analysis. Now I want to be very clear. The models have struggled since last week with the timing, the extent, and the depth of this system. And right now, there's not even that strong of agreement between the European and the GFS. So I'm recording this on Monday morning. This is Friday that we're talking about this rain coming through. So expect to see a lot of variability. This is one of those weeks where I wish I did a video for you every day so we could stay on top of this. But if we look out there past this event, this is what the jet stream is doing by the time we get into next Monday. You have a trough here that's entering and a trough there that's exiting. Now playing this forward, the trough in the west digs. We get a little bit of ridging over us. We're going to see temperatures try to rebound a bit to the end of the month. But the pattern stays relatively open and moving. And by the time we start the month of December, we go back to some sort of, Arctic ridging that happens somewhere in this vicinity. And colder has to come out somewhere when that occurs. We're starting to see that coming over to our region. That also means there's a bit of a drier signal with that. So the week 1, the main system is coming up like this, and then it rolls off to New England, and that's our Friday heavy precipitation event right there. But in week 2, see how we have a drier signal? That's overall because the flow still wants to come out of the northwest for us here. And that also means that out there into week 2, we could see some colder air returning. So if we talk here about temperatures, we're going to see, again, moderation this week until the weekend storm system. But then after that, we'll take a look at what those longer range temperatures are going to do. So here's Monday's high temperatures compared to normal. Getting into Tuesday, look at the warmth coming back to the plains. By Wednesday, we're back up near 60 on the coast in the mid-60s, but that matches the temperature in the mid-plains, which is amazing to think that we're going to be just as warm as they are in North Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas for late November. But as we get toward Thursday, that's when the rain-cooled air is in place. Friday, there it is really kind of cool for us. And as we go forward, we're cooler here than we are going to be in the plains. And this broad ridge starts to open up, and that's where we want to see the temperature pattern kind of adjust going out in there in a week 2. So let's go have a look at it here. Now, day 5 through 10, to finish the month, the greatest warmth is in the midsection of the country. But looking longer term, remember that flow pattern was doing something a bit like this with a lot of cross-polar ridging. So we don't fully break away into warm conditions across the Carolinas as we start the month of November. Okay, we've got an idea about these next couple of weeks. That's what I wanted to really just focus on at the beginning of this video. The whole second half is going to be all long range and a bit on South America. And where that starts off with is the CPC on Friday released their newest update for week 3 and week 4. So this is really the first 2 weeks of December. Now you notice that they don't want to get rid of that Arctic blocking setup. And that's why we got colder across the northern interior of the United States. And if there's somewhere that runs the risk of being warmer, it's pretty far to the south and west. Now with this particular pattern, if we keep deeper troughs here and here, okay, the northwest benefits. We continue to see the drought issues in the southern plains extending the hardwood winter wheat belt. But the reason we see drier over us is just too much northwest flow. That's what the current projections are. Now from here, I would like to show you what the European model is suggesting for the month of December. It's got a bit more of a mixed signal for the Carolinas. Overall, you see a drier risk, but I expect the month of December to be very volatile. And the reason for that is I expect in the month of December for La Nina to really start to show that it's fading. And here's my reasoning for that. We have seen in November very strong trade winds. Okay? We've also seen strong westerly wind bursts. We've seen a negative PDO signal set up. That's warmth here with cold along the periphery. But what I'm suggesting is that these trade winds are going to start to lose their strong influence because these winds right over here are going to back off first. They're the westerly wind bursts. And if they start to leave, then that allows the La Nina to push through. And if it pushes through, it resets the MJO. And if it resets the MJO, it can affect the whole tropical trade wind pattern. And I think that's really going to happen in multiple waves starting in the month of December. I think December, some point in early December, we will see the peak of this La Nina and it will start to fade. Now, that PDO signal right up here suggests that the jet stream is going to do a whole lot more of this in winter. And if there's some subtropical ridging that sets up over the southeast, that's going to give us a volatile temperature pattern. In other words, when it sits over us, warmer, drier, but then when the cold air blows through, it's really going to just give us a volatile temperature pattern. But what does all this kind of mean in the bigger picture? So let's do that, and we'll come back to that new winter outlook. So first of all, we see strong trade winds here and another round of them there. But see how the westerly wind bursts are not nearly as strong as they are now once we get into December? This is going to let the MJO start to move around. And I'm concerned that it might start to live a bit more over here in phase 7 for a while. Now, we see some indications of that when we look at the fact that the models are saying, okay, MJO's in phase 6, let's bring it into phase 7 and see if it curls around in here a few times before it makes a full break over into the Western Pacific. And if it does that, we know a thing or two about phase 7. Strong Pacific jet, look at the cross-polar blocking that tends to set up. We tend to get deeper troughs that dive here, but they tend to meet ridges that like to sit over the Bahamas. That actually sets us up for a very volatile and very active time period in mid to late December. Still seeing those indications. Now from here, what I want to do is, actually, you know what? Let's go back and look at CPC's outlook for the month of December. Let's see if we can get over. There we go. You notice how they backed off on where they're expecting the really dry conditions. They got you more mild because there's going to be at times that ridge that sits here. But just imagine it will get replaced, much like it did this last week, with these Arctic blasts when the cross-polar blocking sets up. That's what happens. You block up the poles, it just comes flying through here. It actually makes that sound, by the way. It comes flying through here like this. Now, since I'm sitting here, I got to show you the new 3-month outlook that the CPC just released. And they've now pushed the risk of it really being drier farther to our south. And they're giving us this very La Nina look to winter. In fact, I've been saying this for a while. But I could take these two maps and pull them out and put them into a textbook and say, this is what a typical La Nina looks like. And I'll make a case now that I don't think that this is going to be a typical La Nina winter. Now, I'm not going against the CPC. The CPC made this figure based upon their model and the fact that today we have strong La Nina. And it's still quite speculative that the La Nina is going to let go. But I think this La Nina is going to let go. I think it's going to be very important to understand what could happen. Now, as the La Nina lets go, that lets the MJO take over as the dominant tropical subseasonal variable. But I want to talk about the warm water you see here and the warm water you see there. Because on either side of the warm plumes of water in the North Pacific and North Atlantic, we had during the month of October a lot of snowpack that built up throughout Siberia and across the Canadian archipelago. So there's like warm water nosing in here and here, but brutally cold in between. And this particular setup tends to lend to more what we call Arctic blocking. And Arctic blocking tends to let more of that cold air across this section of the United States. It tends to build into big ridges that run up like this and troughs that go across Europe. And what that has me concerned about is if this also weakens the polar vortex, we could get these big shots at cold air that hit the eastern half of North America and Europe at the same time. That's one of the early indicators that big snowpack in October gives us, and it's lasted into November as well. From there, I got to show you this. This is the new update from the IRI multi-model group out of Columbia University. They still have about a 75% chance that through December, January, February, La Nina hangs on. But we cannot get hung up on that number. You see, the moment that the trade winds fail, La Nina, the atmosphere doesn't behave like La Nina anymore. Okay? The moment they fail, the atmosphere loses its La Nina flavor. The ocean temperatures take forever to change. That's why this still looks like all these big blue bars are everywhere even through midwinter. But the atmosphere is going to move first. And that's why I think the pattern is going to be more volatile than what is suggested by the warmer, drier outlook you've seen. There's another interesting point to this. Now, the newest outlook for July, August, September has the probability of being El Nino as the highest. And that has me worried about next summer's drought risk. Because historically, whenever there is a El Nino, the blues represent drier. For June to September, we tend to run the risk of having drier conditions here. It's also a risk that we don't have all of the tropical systems that come through. El Nino years tend to favor fewer tropical systems. It tends to be wetter, though, from the plains through the Midwest. See the warmer colors? That's where it tends to be wetter June to September. But we run the risk of being drier. So these are all things we're going to have to keep a close eye on. So to reiterate here, this outlook for December, January, February, I would not be fooled into thinking that it's going to be a mild winter for us. I also think that it's overly dry in the forecast. I think that getting into next summer, we have the dry risk, but not at this point. That's kind of the case I'm trying to make here. Now, other places around the world, how about South America? Their current root zone soil moisture map shows how dry it's been in parts of the northern and central growing areas lately. But there's been major improvements in Argentina with last week's rain. But I need to make sure that you understand what these improvements mean, because the groundwater is very low there, which means the rain that came in was kind of like a Band-Aid. It went on and improved for just a moment, but didn't cure the longer-term problem. And the longer-term problems can be seen when looking at some NDVI data. So if I zoom in here to Argentina and go to Buenos Aires, the NDVI data through mid-November is still lowest on record. And if you come up here to, let's click off that and go to Cordoba, still very low. And from there, let's go look at Santa Fe, record low. In the last 20 years, it's the lowest. So these issues with long-term drought in Argentina are continue to be a problem. And take a look at the next 10 days. Brand new model run this morning. Mato Grosso into Mato Grosso do Sul, drier than normal. The wettest conditions are east and north. And then this new forecast keeps almost all of Argentina's main growing areas very dry moving forward. The new long range out there through December has risks of being drier than normal in Argentina and southern Brazil, filling back in north with better and wetter conditions. So I think the crop in the north, the big soybean crop, is going to be fine. There's going to be drought risk in southern Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and then through Argentina is going to continue. And that is also being influenced by the current state of La Nina. Should the La Nina fail, we could see these two precipitation anomalies flip going into like January, February, March. So there's a lot to be watching here as well. So I just wanted to provide you with the latest stuff I've been thinking about. And watch out later this week for the potential for some very heavy rain following Thanksgiving. Other than that, we'll keep an eye on where this pattern settles in for winter. Have a good one. Thanks.